My manager told me I was doing great, while secretly filing bad reviews to shut me up about budget fraud. So I printed his praise, matched it to his lies, and handed HR a binder called Evidence of Retaliation that made his lawyer go pale at page 47. When his lawyer flipped to page 47, the whole room went dead quiet. I watched my manager's face drain of color in real time. He kept blinking like he couldn't understand how these papers, his own words, his own contradictions, were staring back at him in black and white. And in that moment, sitting across from him in that bland HR arbitration room in downtown Columbus, Ohio, I realized something. He wasn't shocked that he got caught. He was shocked that I was the one who caught him. But let me rewind. 5 weeks earlier, I was standing in his office, holding a coffee I bought for both of us because I stupidly used to think we were on good terms. He leaned back in his chair, smiled that vague managerial smile, and said, "You're doing great, really. Just don't get involved with the budget numbers. That stuff's complicated." And I believed him. Until HR sent me an official warning for poor performance I didn't even know existed. When I first read the email, my hands literally went numb. The message was cold, short, and somehow already felt like a death sentence. Due to repeated unsatisfactory performance, we are placing you on a 60-day improvement plan. Repeated, unsatisfactory, nobody had ever told me anything like that, not once. I walked straight to his office with the email pulled up on my phone. He didn't even flinch. He just waved it off with, "Oh, that's just HR being HR. Don't worry about it, I'll fix it." But I wasn't stupid. And something about the way he avoided eye contact told me this wasn't an accident. That's when I filed the request for my full HR file. Quietly, no questions, no drama. And when the file came back, thick enough to make the envelope bulge on both sides, I sat at my kitchen table and read every page with my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. 3 falsified reviews. 2 warnings I had never received. 1 final notice for an incident that never happened. And all of them signed by him. The same guy who told me to my face that everything was fine. The same guy who asked me, just a month earlier, to stay out of the budget discrepancies, because it wasn't part of my role. That was the sentence that kept echoing in my head while I printed out the screenshots of his messages praising my work. Every great job on this. Every you saved us this week. Every couldn't do this without you. I hole-punched everything, laid it out on the floor like puzzle pieces, and organized them into a binder I labeled Evidence of Retaliation in big, bold letters. Walking into arbitration felt like walking into court for a crime I didn't commit. But when I slid that binder across the table, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. And that's why, when his lawyer hit page 47, the page with the time-stamped Slack message where he praised the exact work he later claimed I failed to complete, I wasn't surprised by the silence. But what did surprise me was the look my manager gave me. It wasn't fear. It was anger. Cold, focused anger. Like he was irritated I had the nerve to defend myself. Like this was personal to him in a way I didn't understand yet. And then he said something quiet, something I wasn't meant to hear, that told me this wasn't just retaliation. It was something darker, something planned, something that had absolutely nothing to do with performance. And everything to do with what I accidentally discovered about the budget. I used to trust him. That's the part that still makes my stomach twist. When I first started at the office, just a small branch of a bigger consulting firm in Columbus, Ohio, he was the one who showed me around. He introduced me to everyone, explained the client accounts, and even gave me this weird little pep talk about surviving corporate politics. I thought he was being friendly. Looking back, it was more like he was choosing his pawn. For the first year, things were normal. I worked hard, did well, and honestly liked the job. We weren't saving the world, we were just making operations reports for clients, but I liked the rhythm of it. I liked being dependable, and he made me feel like I mattered. He'd swing by my desk with coffee, drop comments like "You're one of the good ones," and he always talked about my potential. I thought he meant it. The shift started small. The first thing was when he asked me to clean up some client invoices. He said the numbers were off by a bit because the client kept changing scope. I didn't think anything of it, I just reorganized the spreadsheet. But that was the first time I noticed the math didn't make sense. The fees didn't line up with the hours. The dates didn't match the logs. I brought it up to him casually like it was nothing. He just smiled and said, "Don't worry about those. The higher-ups handle billing. We just report." Then he changed the subject so smoothly that I didn't notice the evasion until later. After that, things got strange. He started giving me certain files to double-check. Only certain ones, always from the same handful of clients, always at the end of the month. And always with this weird undertone of urgency like, "I just need you to fix this quickly so we can close the books." And I did, because I thought I was helping. He also started confiding in me about things I had no business knowing, office gossip, client drama, even minor financial things that felt off, like he was testing how much I could hear without reacting. But the moment that really sticks out was last October. He leaned over my desk and said, "You're too smart for your own good sometimes. Just don't ask too many questions." He laughed afterward like it was a joke, but it sat wrong with me for days. Still, I kept working, kept my head down, tried to be the employee he said I was, reliable, quiet, trustworthy. Then I noticed something that still makes my chest go tight when I think about it. My quarterly review, when he told me was great, never showed up in the HR portal. At first I thought it was a glitch. I emailed HR, but they were swamped and told me to ask him, so I did. He told me, "Oh, it's not uploaded yet. Don't worry about it." I dropped it, because I wanted to believe him, because thinking my manager was lying straight to my face felt too heavy and too strange to even consider. And then the official warning landed in my inbox. And then the HR file showed 3 unsatisfactory reviews he never mentioned. And then I realized something was deeply, intentionally wrong. But I still didn't understand why. Why me? Why the lies? Why the performance reviews? At least, not until I found the inconsistency in the budget spreadsheets, one that tied back to him in a way I couldn't explain away. A mistake too glaring to ignore. A mistake too deliberate to be accidental. A mistake that made me understand he wasn't protecting me. He was grooming me to take the fall. After I found that inconsistency, everything around me started to feel off. Like the office air got heavier, thicker. Every interaction felt loaded. Even the way he said "good morning" had this strange edge, like he was waiting for me to slip. The inconsistency was small, at first. Just a duplicated vendor payment buried inside a spreadsheet I'd already reviewed twice the previous month. But this time, the total rolled up into a monthly summary that didn't match the ledger. It wasn't a typo, it wasn't a formula error, it was deliberate. The payment was entered under my initials. I stared at the screen for a solid minute, feeling my throat tighten. I hadn't processed that vendor file. I hadn't touched any payment logs. My role was reports and client dashboards, never billing. I printed the sheet and highlighted the line. Then I quietly checked the access logs. The change was made at 7:42 am 2 weeks earlier. I didn't clock in until 8:30. He had used my credentials. That's when the paranoia started creeping in. I know paranoia sounds dramatic, but once you find out your manager is fabricating your performance history and altering financial records under your name, it screws with your entire sense of reality. I started to wonder what else he had touched, what else he had planted, how far back it went. At work he acted normal, too normal, fake normal. He'd walk past my desk, clap my shoulder, and say things like "appreciate you" or "you're a lifesaver." Meanwhile, I was sitting there, trying not to physically shake, knowing he was actively setting me up for something. I wanted to confront him, I really did, but something deeper than fear stopped me. Instinct. Survival. Because by then, it wasn't just about bad reviews. It wasn't even about retaliation. It felt like he was building a narrative around me, one he could weaponize. And if he was bold enough to forge HR documents, he was bold enough to do worse. The next sign came on a Tuesday morning, around 10 am. He sent me a Slack message. "Need you to adjust the brownstone file. The numbers are off again. Don't worry, I'll explain later." My stomach flipped. The brownstone account was one of the clients tied to the earlier discrepancies. I didn't touch it, not after what I found, so I wrote back, "I think this might be a billing issue. Shouldn't finance handle it?" He replied instantly, "Just do it, don't involve finance." That was when the fear turned into something else, something sharper. I took screenshots. I printed them. I slid them into the binder I was building even before I fully admitted it to myself. Over the next few weeks, he ramped up the pressure in little ways. He CC'd me on emails I didn't need to be on. He forgot to invite me to meetings, then subtly implied to HR that I skipped them. He criticized tiny things, like formatting or file naming, things he never cared about before. He even started calling me into his office for these weird, vague check-ins, where he'd talk in circles and watch my reactions like he was trying to measure how much I knew. The worst moment came when I overheard him talking to another manager in the hallway. My name came up. Then I heard him say, in this low, careful voice, "She's becoming a liability." A liability. Like I was a problem to eliminate. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. By that point, I knew he wasn't panicking. He wasn't sloppy. He wasn't scared about being caught. He was executing something. A plan. And for some reason I still didn't understand, I was the target. I just didn't know yet that the truth behind it would hit even harder than the betrayal itself. The first real break in the story, the moment everything snapped into focus, came on a Thursday afternoon. One of those gray Columbus days where the sky looks like concrete and the whole city feels tired. I was heading to the copy room, binder pages in hand, trying not to look suspicious. I wasn't expecting anything. I was just trying to get through the day without drawing attention. That's when I heard my name, not in a conversation. Not in a normal tone. In a meeting. A meeting I wasn't invited to. I recognized the voices. My manager, HR's operations coordinator, and someone from corporate compliance who rarely showed up on-site. Their voices carried through the thin conference room wall. And I don't know what made me stop walking, but something inside me, a warning, an instinct, whatever, told me to stay still and listen. The compliance guy said, "We'll need the full paper trail before we escalate this." Then my manager said, "I've documented months of her errors. She's reckless. If we don't act soon, she could expose the budget irregularities." My heart stopped. Budget irregularities. Expose me, expose them. I leaned closer, barely breathing, as HR asked, "Are you certain your documentation will stand?" "If she challenges it," he cut her off. "I've been building this case for months. Everything is under her logins. If this blows up, she's the one holding the bag, not me." My blood ran cold. Then he said something I will never forget. "She doesn't even realize she's been doing half the changes I assign. She's so desperate to impress me she never questions anything." I had to put my hand on the wall to stay upright. He wasn't reacting to my discoveries. He had planned this long before I even suspected anything. He was feeding me files he altered. He was using my credentials to create audit trails under my name. He was coaching me, shaping my tasks, pushing certain spreadsheets to me, all so he could trace the fraud back to my login. The plan wasn't retaliation for discovering the errors. The plan was older, months older, maybe a year, and he said it so casually, like I was a pawn that had served its purpose. Like I wasn't a real person with a life and a reputation and rent to pay. The compliance guy hummed like he was thinking, "If this goes to audit, they'll ask why she kept quiet." My manager answered instantly. "Because she's incompetent, naive, honestly. I told her not to touch the financials and she ignored me. She made this mess herself." The lie was so clean, so smooth, it didn't even sound like a lie. He had rehearsed this. He had shaped the narrative so carefully that it sounded plausible even to me, and I knew the truth. HR murmured something about next steps, but I couldn't hear much after that. My ears were ringing. My skin felt like it was buzzing. I backed away from the door before someone came out and saw me. When I made it back to my desk, I sat there staring at my monitor, hands shaking so badly I had to hold them in my lap just to make them stop. All those months of him acting like he trusted me, like he valued me, like he was mentoring me, it wasn't kindness, it was grooming. He didn't just want me to take the blame. He wanted me to believe I caused it. And the worst part? He almost pulled it off. Because until that moment, I never once considered that the smiling, good job manager, the one who brought me coffee and joked about spreadsheets, had been building a trap for me from the very beginning. But now I knew. Now I understood the first twist. This wasn't retaliation. This was premeditated. He had set me up months before I ever touched a suspicious file. And I realized something else, something even more terrifying. If he had gone that far already, what else was he willing to do? I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling of my apartment in Clintonville, replaying every conversation, every task, every spreadsheet he ever handed me, every fake smile, every subtle manipulation. By morning, I wasn't just angry. I was done being prey. I knew I needed three things. One, proof he accessed files under my credentials. Two, proof he fabricated HR documents. Three, proof he had a motive that wasn't performance-related. The problem was simple. He was careful, deadly careful. He knew how audits worked. He understood access logs and metadata better than anyone else in our office. He wasn't sloppy. He counted on the fact that I didn't know how deep the system recorded changes. But what he didn't count on was that I was a quick learner with nothing left to lose. So I started quietly, systematically gathering evidence, the way he had quietly, systematically been gathering evidence against me. My first step was to talk to IT. Not directly, that would tip him off. Instead, I filed a help desk ticket asking why my login history showed remote access activity at times I wasn't working. I phrased it like a confused newbie. Is this normal? I just want to make sure I'm not messing something up. The IT guy emailed me a full authentication history to ease my concerns. And right there, in a neat little table, were 7 early morning and late night logins I didn't make. All from a device ID that wasn't mine. I printed them. The second step was HR. Over the next few days, I visited HR under the guise of clarifying my improvement plan, pretending to be confused and embarrassed. They pulled up my unsatisfactory reviews right in front of me. I kept my expression neutral while I asked questions like, "Are verbal reviews not valid?" Because my manager said I was doing well. I needed them to say it out loud. The HR rep sighed and said, "We rely on what's documented in the system. If he didn't give you the verbal feedback he noted, that's another issue." That was gold. I printed that email chain too. My third step was risky. Dangerous, honestly, but necessary. I started gathering all the files he had ever asked me to adjust. Every spreadsheet, every version, every line change. I built a map, literally a map of inconsistencies and anomalies. I used my tiny kitchen table like a war room, spreading out printouts and marking patterns with a yellow highlighter until my hand cramped. A picture started to form. A very ugly, very intentional picture. Specific clients were repeatedly overbilled or double charged. The discrepancies always rolled into the same monthly summary, the same budget bucket, and the adjustments always landed under either my initials or another junior analyst's, someone who left the company last summer without explanation. I dug through old financial folders and found her name on a few of the older anomalies. That made my heart drop into my stomach. Had he set her up too? Had she left, or had she been pushed out the same way? I didn't have proof yet, but it made everything feel even more sinister. Once I had my evidence, I bought a cheap printer, a pack of colored tabs, and a binder thick enough to double as a weapon. I labeled each section. Logs, reviews, screenshots, spreadsheets, Slack messages, meeting conflicts, timeline. I organized it like a prosecutor preparing for trial. By the time I finished, it was almost 3 in the morning. My whole apartment looked like a crime scene, papers everywhere, sticky notes on the walls, a timeline taped to my fridge. That's when I realized something huge. He wasn't just manipulating numbers. He wasn't just covering his tracks. He was using people as shields, real people, including me. I sat on the floor staring at that binder, heart pounding, fingers shaking, and I said out loud to no one, "He's not just crooked. He's dangerous." But even then, even with everything I'd uncovered, I still didn't know the whole story. I didn't know his real motive, or the second twist that would turn everything darker. Much darker. The second twist hit me before I even realized it was a twist. It started with an email. A simple, bland subject line that didn't match the way my heart dropped the second I opened it. Ray. Request for additional documentation. Former employee file, former employee. My pulse kicked into a sprint. Inside was a short message from HR. Per your inquiry, we've attached the archived performance records for former analyst Jenna Collins. Please note that these files were reviewed during her exit process last July. I hadn't asked for them. I hadn't even mentioned her name. I stared at the screen, throat tightening. Who requested this? Before I could overthink it, I downloaded the file. Jenna Collins, the woman whose initials I'd seen tied to older anomalies, the one who left suddenly, the one nobody talked about. Her file looked disturbingly familiar. 3 unsatisfactory reviews. Warnings she supposedly ignored. Notes claiming she mishandled financials. Comments about her being unreliable and poor with details. The same pattern, the same language, the same structure, and the same signature, his. It was like looking at a ghost version of my own HR folder. My skin prickled. My chest went tight. The hair on my arms stood up. He had done it before. He had done it exactly before. Suddenly, everything made sense in a way that made me feel physically sick. But the real twist wasn't that he had set up another analyst. The twist came when I scrolled through her archived Slack messages, the ones HR included by accident. There, buried between feedback logs and project updates, was a thread between Jenna and him. A thread titled, Budget Variance Questions. My hands shook as I clicked it open. Jenna had noticed discrepancies too. Almost the same ones I found. She had written, "These numbers don't make sense. The hours and billing aren't matching. Can we review?" He responded. "Stop digging, you're misunderstanding. Leave the brownstone accounts alone." My stomach twisted. Brownstone, the same account he told me not to touch. A few lines down, she pushed back, "I'm not comfortable signing off on this. Something is off." Then his last message, "Drop it. This isn't your scope anymore." I sat back in my chair, mouth dry. She did question him. She did push back. She did see the irregularities. 3 weeks later, she voluntarily resigned. Except now I could see the truth so clearly it felt like a punch. She didn't quit. She was pushed out using the same method he was using on me. But the last message in the thread was what sealed my pulse into a cold, rhythmic panic. A Slack notification from him to Jenna at 11:52 p.m. the night before her exit interview. "Final warning, you're putting yourself at risk. This won't end the way you think." I stared at that line for so long my eyes blurred, and then the worst possibility hit me, heavy and suffocating. What if he didn't just push her out to cover his fraud? What if he used her, like he was using me, to reroute blame, distort audits, bury financial manipulation under a problem employee? What if she had been the scapegoat for the fiscal year before me? And if she had been the shield last year and I was the shield this year? Who was he shielding? Himself? Or someone above him? The answer dropped into place like a brick. It wasn't just fraud. It wasn't just retaliation. He was part of something bigger, and he needed a fall person every cycle. The room felt like it shrank around me. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. He hadn't chosen me because I was convenient. He had chosen me because I trusted him. And people who trust you make the perfect cover, the perfect alibi, the perfect sacrifice, and he had done it before. God only knew how many times, but I still didn't know why. Not really, not the root of it. That truth, the darkest one, was coming next. I always thought the reason would be something simple, greed maybe, or fear of being caught. Some corporate cliché like cooking the books to hit quarterly numbers. Something that made him a jerk, not a monster. But the truth wasn't simple, and it wasn't just about money. I didn't find the real reason until the night I decided to dig deeper into the archived folders on the shared drive. The ones nobody touched because management claimed they were legacy data. I only opened them because I was desperate, and honestly, because something in my gut told me the pattern didn't stop with Jenna or me. I found a folder labeled FY19 exception logs, another labeled variance adjustments FY20, and buried inside those, a private subfolder that should have been locked behind a director-level password. Audit Shield. The name alone made my skin crawl. Inside were spreadsheets dating back 4 years. Each year had a different initials column flagged in red, different analysts, different departments, but the same pattern. Irregularities tied to a single manager's projects. Corrections signed under someone else's credentials. HR complaints quietly attached to the names highlighted in red. 4 years, 4 employees. Each one listed as having performance issues. Each one eventually resigned. Each one tied to the same man, my manager. The pattern wasn't random. It was a system, a cycle, and he had been running it like clockwork. But the file that made my heart stop was a Word document titled, Procedure, Containment Protocol Personnel. It was written by him. I opened it, and I swear, for a full 10 seconds I stopped breathing. It laid out everything, cold, clinical, step by step, like instructions for disinfecting a piece of equipment rather than destroying a person's career. There were bullet points for identifying employees with sufficient access but low organizational influence. Another section about using developmental feedback to build a record of underperformance. A line about transferring ownership of sensitive deliverables to designated shields. And then, the one that made my stomach drop. Escalate HR involvement before audit deadlines to classify shields as liabilities if discrepancies are detected. Shields. That's what he called us. Not people, not coworkers, not employees. Shields. Human shields. A disposable layer between him and any audit trail that might land on his desk. He wasn't stealing money for himself. That was the part I didn't see coming. He wasn't pocketing anything. The fraud was to hide missed deadlines, client overbilling, underdelivery reports, mistakes he made, shortcuts he took, hours he inflated so his team looked efficient. He didn't want money, he wanted recognition. Promotions, praise, standing. Every discrepancy he buried, every manipulated spreadsheet, every rerouted blame, all of it fed one thing: his image. His consistent excellence record. His impeccable leadership metrics. His high client retention numbers. He wasn't greedy, he was obsessed. Obsessed with being untouchable. Obsessed with rising through the ranks. Obsessed with looking like the perfect manager, even if it meant destroying people underneath him. He had built a whole career on the bodies of employees he quietly sabotaged, documented, and discarded. The cruelty wasn't in what he took. It was in what he destroyed. Opportunities, reputations, confidence, careers. I sat there staring at that document, realizing I was never a person to him. I was never a mentee. Never a valued employee. Never someone he thought highly of. I was a tool. A barrier. A name he could assign to any mistake he needed to bury. A placeholder to absorb his failures until HR or compliance believed I was the weak link. He chose people like me because we tried hard, because we trusted authority, because we blamed ourselves before we blamed anyone else, because we were easy to break. That was the reason. Cold, clinical, calculated. He didn't hate me. He didn't retaliate against me. He selected me. And the moment I understood that, the moment I saw how intentional it all was, something inside me hardened. He had built his entire career on using people like me as shields. Now he was going to learn what happens when a shield stops protecting and starts cutting back. The morning of arbitration, I walked into that building on Broad Street calmer than I'd felt in months. Not because I wasn't scared, I was terrified. My hands were sweating, my stomach was tight, and I'd barely eaten in 2 days. But underneath all that was something else. Something solid. I wasn't walking in as his shield anymore. I was walking in as the person who could end him. The room was bland and beige, like every HR room in America. Rectangular table, fake plant, cold air that smelled faintly like disinfectant. My manager sat across from me, wearing a suit too sharp for a meeting he claimed was no big deal. His lawyer sat beside him flipping through a slim folder I knew wouldn't hold up against the binder in my bag. He wouldn't look at me, not fully, not directly. Cowards never do. HR started with introductions. Compliance nodded at me politely. His lawyer did the whole corporate smirk thing, the "we're here to resolve this professionally" tone. Then they asked me to present my concerns. I didn't speak right away. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out the binder, and set it on the table with a heavy thud that made everyone flinch. Evidence of retaliation stared back at them in bold letters. HR raised an eyebrow. Compliance sat up straighter. His lawyer's smirk flickered. My manager still wouldn't look at me. "Before I begin," I said, keeping my voice steady, "everything in this binder is time-stamped, documented, and cross-verified, and every page is backed up off-site." He finally looked at me then, not with surprise, but with a flash of something colder. Rage, good. I opened to the first tab, access logs, then falsified HR reviews, then Slack screenshots, then spreadsheets with altered credentials. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't shake, I didn't cry. I just walked them through it, step by step, exactly the way he had trained me to be thorough. The room stayed silent except for the sound of papers turning and his lawyer whispering faster and faster in his ear. After about 20 minutes, compliance held up a hand. "Stop, go back, page 47. I did, the Slack message. The praise he sent me for the exact deliverable he claimed I failed. That's when it happened. His lawyer turned slowly toward him and whispered something I couldn't hear, but I saw the reaction. My manager's jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped along the side of his face. And then compliance asked the question that sealed everything. Did you intentionally alter performance documents to preemptively assign liability prior to the annual audit cycle? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was admission. HR looked stunned, not sympathetic, not shocked on my behalf, but horrified at the scope of what was unfolding. The coordinator started flipping through the reviews like she couldn't believe her own system had been used this way. The lawyer finally spoke. "We need a recess." Compliance didn't even look up. "No, we're done." The room shifted. Power shifted. And for the first time in months, I felt air fill my lungs all the way. They escorted him out, not roughly, but with a firmness that said everything. By afternoon, he was put on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. By the end of the week, corporate announced he was terminated for cause. And by the end of the month, compliance reached back out to me to confirm the internal audit had uncovered 4 years of manipulated data and a pattern of misconduct tied directly to him. They called it a significant breach of ethical and fiduciary responsibility. I called it justice. I got a formal apology from the company. My record was cleared. Every false review was erased. HR offered to restore my position with enhanced support, but I didn't go back. I didn't want a desk where I spent a year being groomed to take the fall. I found a new job downtown within 6 weeks, better pay, better manager, better everything. And I walked in on day one with my head higher than I ever thought possible. Sometimes people ask if I feel bad for what happened to him. No. He built a career on grinding people down until they blamed themselves. He used trust as a weapon. He treated human beings like disposable armor. And in the end, he learned the one thing he never saw coming. Shields don't stay quiet forever. Sometimes they cut.